Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God from the state of Washington to the state of Maine to Brownsville, Texas, and the tip of Florida. Today, we speak to this atmosphere. Today, burn this thing. This virus hates heat. You just burn this thing. Burn, burn. I call for a supernatural heat wave straight out of hell. Burn, burn. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God. You don't do it. You don't do it. You don't do it. You get out of here now. Burn. You don't do it. You don't do it. You don't do it. You get out of here. Burn this thing. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God. You are destroyed forever, and you'll never be back.
Welcome back to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I will be your host, Patrick Smith. And before we introduce our guest for today, I want to do a quick shout out to Jeff Berwick at the Dollar Vigilante, who has now been unpersoned from YouTube. If you search for that channel, you will see that it no longer exists on the Google YouTube averse. And so I look forward to seeing all of you, having already looked and found him over on Library and Odyssey and BitChute, to get off of this YouTube platform that I can tell by looking at the numbers in real time that too many of you people are still watching us on. So I'm shaming all of you a little bit. Go get off this platform. It is taking everyone down, and that's going to be one of the topics that we discuss today. The last thing I want to let you know about on this channel is that if you look through the back catalog on YouTube for this Anarchast channel, because of it started at like 12:30 or 1 a.m. a couple nights ago, I started getting emails from Google going through the entire back catalog. I'm talking like 5+ years ago, finding videos and issuing community guidelines, warnings, and problems on this channel. So they are actively looking through our channel right now as we speak. We might not be on YouTube much longer. So please, again, make sure you find us on the other platforms. You can find links to all of the platforms that we both live stream to and upload our videos to on our website, disenthralled.me/platforms. You can find a link to that in the description of this video right now. It's towards the top, I believe. You can find us there. But just so you're aware, as sort of a protective way to not have all of the connections that we currently have on YouTube taken away, deleted in an instant, we went through and sort of sanitized this channel. So about 70 some odd videos are deleted from YouTube. They no longer exist on this platform because YouTube doesn't want us here. They don't. That's something that we need to really learn, and maybe we'll talk more with our guest about this here in a minute, but they don't want us here, and it's their property. And so we're going to take our content, and hopefully the viewers, you guys, will come with us as we go to a place that does want us, like Library and like Odyssey and like BitChute. All of the content that was removed from YouTube is obviously still available over on Library, so all of this stuff still exists on the internet for those that actually want to find it. So make sure you go check us out over there. Okay. So that's kind of the end of our announcements for today. I want to, and I'm proud to, welcome Keith Knight to the show. He is of the Don't Tread on Anyone channel on Library, BitChute, and YouTube for now. And he's also a contributor to the Libertarian Institute. Welcome to the show, Keith. Good to have you.
Patrick Smith, thank you for having me, brother.
Well, you had me. You know, I was recently a guest on his show, and we talked about a commie debate, and it was really interesting to sort of just disassemble the communists' points as they went through this debate. That was very interesting. So thanks for having me on your show. And I look forward. We always have such great conversations. Like we were talking for 30 minutes before this show started about all kinds of neat stuff that we should have probably started streaming all that. It was really good discussion. But how you been, man? How you been?
I've been doing excellent, trying to diversify the channel. I am like 98% backed up on library. So I got everything there, as well as BitChute, as well as archive.org and minds.com as well. So, I mean, people are taking down, Derek Bro's taken down 65,000 subscribers. No warning, nothing, not even an explanation. So, yeah, this is what I've basically been putting all my focus into, and all the links to my stuff you can find at the Libertarian Institute under my podcast, Don't Tread on Anyone. It's more of a show. I actually don't have a podcast.
And I mean, Library and Odyssey is like the normie front end for Library. I think is the best video platform alternative out there. It's fully functional. It works great. As long as the people that upload videos make sure to upload a low enough bit rate, then anybody on even mobile devices can watch the videos well. They're constantly improving the features. Anyway, this is turning into a commercial for Library at this point. But look, I mean, it's
well deserved.
It is well deserved because it's not like some of the alternative platforms which barely have any features. Like it's got everything you need. It's got, you can subscribe, you can follow people. I think it's just like playlists, but they're constantly adding features, so it's great. Go check them out. You wanted to talk. One of the things that you were interested in talking about was social media censorship, and like you were saying, Derek, you said had like a 60K sub channel. Dollar Vigilante, I think, had hit 300,000 recently. Just deleted in an instant. Yeah, we are streaming. I see your comment. Let's see who said that. Somebody said they're watching it on Float. I missed it. Voluntary Dan watching it on Float. Yeah, we are streaming to YouTube. We're streaming to Float. We're streaming to Twitch and DLive as well right now. And I should have all the comments pulled up. So wherever you comment, I should see them. And we also have a super chat link in the top of the comments that doesn't involve you giving Google 40% of your tip. So if you want to tip the channel, or if you want to have a super chat, or make sure that your question or comment gets seen, if you use that link, you can do the same thing. It'll show up on the screen just like with a normal YouTube super chat, except you can do that from any of the platforms and Google doesn't get your money. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so you wanted to talk about social media censorship, and it's happening in real time all around us right now. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
The main idea is that, of course, the long-term solution is we have to embrace competitors, just as it was only MySpace until competitors. It was only Sears was going to take over. It was only Starbucks. It was only Blockbuster. These things that seem sort of inevitable eventually face some sort of competition because people out-innovate. However, I am of the opinion that it is completely unlibertarian and unjustified for them to cancel someone's channel unless that person has explicitly violated the rules not because, well, they're really big and now a big company has extra obligations they previously didn't because people voluntarily went on the platform. My position is that what we have here is a breach of contract between the owner, let's say YouTube in this case, and let's use Dollar Vigilante, Jeff Berwick, as an example. If I own an apartment complex, I am the owner, I have the right to exclude. What I would essentially do is more or less say that here are the rules for anyone who wants to rent from me. Pay your rent by the first, no kidnapping, no rape, no slavery, and no loud music between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Now, imagine one day, after you've moved all your stuff into your apartment that you're renting, I burn down my apartment that all your stuff is in, and you've put all these years of effort into getting the furniture and moving it in there. I burn it down because you have, let's say, watched an R-rated movie, and I consider that to be violence because it sort of advocates violence, which leads to violence. This is a blatant breach of contract. Of course, you might then say, well, in the explicit fine print of some of these companies, they have fine print saying more or less, we can take down your stuff whenever. Well, that is the equivalent of saying, you came to my restaurant, asked for a glass of wine, but I didn't tell you this glass of wine cost $10 million. Well, that a meeting of the minds is a general agreement between two parties that would be enforceable based on the general understanding. So it's more or less saying you never said I couldn't take all the food out of your refrigerator, or you never told me I couldn't take all your belongings and sell them to someone else for for a profit, even though you said make yourself at home. So, in short, these are general understandings that are being violated by social media companies. I am in no way saying, therefore, a group of psychopaths called politicians should step in and regulate. That has to be the worst solution to this, but by far. You can see Barack Obama prosecuted 7 journalists and whistleblowers under the Espionage Act, more than all other presidents combined. Government went to Kent State and shot a bunch of peaceful protesters for exercising their free speech. Bradley Manning, Chelsea Manning, the U.S. government shut down a newspaper in Iraq. A guy named Paul L. Bremer was in charge of that operation because they were inciting violence against the troops invading the country based on a lie. So, no, government is not the solution. However, they are unjustified in just kicking someone off because it is a breach of contract. They have the obligation because there was the meeting of the minds general understanding. So, 1, they are unjustified in doing so. We have to combat them by embracing competition and going to alternatives.
God damn it. You're going to make me devil's advocate for the worst companies around right now. All right, so I'm going to try and oppose you in this discussion and fight back because I think, at least up until now, I've disagreed with your position. So let me try and let's see how this goes. First of all, what's up, ANCAP? Good to see you. Good to see you over on Float as well. Nice. Okay, so it's not a general agreement. It's an explicit agreement. Like, it literally says in very clearly subjective, opinionated ways that they don't want content that they find distasteful. And that's in their right to do. They can put that in the agreement, and, you know, as they say, continuing to use these systems, you know, sort of constitutes agreeing to the new terms as they evolve. And if they don't like what you're doing and the terms say that you have to only post things that we approve of, then so be it. Like, I don't see a breach of contract when they have explicitly put in purposefully subjective, wide open language that can be construed to mean pretty much whatever they need it to mean to do whatever they need it to want. Like, if we didn't want to have to deal with having that messy garbage enforced on us, then we shouldn't have used the service to begin with, or we should have stopped using the service when they put that language in. Because, you know, I've been on Facebook since they first opened it up to people that weren't, well, I was on Facebook since they first opened it up to non-college students before they deleted me, 4 months ago now, something like that. And, you know, at every step of the way, as their terms of service and community guidelines evolved, I continued to use the service. So I'm not seeing your case.
My case, I believe, still stands because it is enforced in such a ridiculous manner. You will see politicians, blue checkmark people on Twitter, outright advocating violence like Reza Aslan. We burn it all down if RGB gets replaced. But then other people, it is not equally enforced. They get, banned for the most ridiculous thing. There was a guy who said, if you invade my house, I'll shoot you and defend myself. He got kicked off Twitter. So what you essentially have is you're signaling, here's what's okay in our company, and here's what's not okay. And then you engage in the behavior that's generally recognized as okay, and then they stop all of your progress from continuing, all of the effort you've put into in the channel. This has to qualify under a breach of contract or a general understanding. The general understanding is just don't post stuff that is like, totally doxing people. Don't advocate violence or don't advocate kidnapping or anything. And you can see these people just get terminated for the most ridiculous, nonsensical things. So it's important we call it out as unjustified. In the same way, just because they're a private company, in the same way you could say the service was bad, so I'm writing Yelp reviews, I'm going elsewhere, I'm recognizing it as totally illegitimate. I think it's a breach of contract because it is inconsistently enforced. They're displaying one set of rules and then enforcing them inconsistently. Therein lies the foundation of the breach of the meeting of the minds that I referenced earlier.
Interesting. And maybe we'll have to have Kinsella on. Maybe I can get you and me and Kinsella on Disenthrall, and we can all go around and talk about the contract law behind it. But you've either broken the contract based on their subjective, messy wording, or you haven't. But let's say everyone had broken the terms of the contract using the messy, wide open language. It would still be up to them which of those associations to break. Like, they don't, just because it's in the contract doesn't mean that they have to break the association with you. They can let you slide. It's their property, right?
It is, but it still is a violation of the general agreement, just as if you rent a room from me in my Airbnb and I say, here are the general rules, no violence. Well, if you question a certain historical event, some people literally call that violence because you are defaming the dead, which leads to further violence against that group. That is so obviously not violence. Just because one group is the arbiter in no way means we can't judge whether or not that was a morally justified opinion or option of theirs. Just as I would be completely unjustified in burning down the room you're renting from me after you've put all the work into it, clearly following what could generally be understood by rational minds as following the rules, I'd have no right to do that, and they have no right to take down someone's property that they've homesteaded, more or less, such as the Dollar Vigilante or Conscious Resistance. I mean, Patrick, they're not even saying, you broke these rules, and here are the rules. They're literally taking it down without any explanation. You've been violated. They don't even do strikes. It's just the prime example of what a violation of contract would be in any libertarian world, where obligations would arise only as a causal result of agreements or general understandings between two parties. This counts as I would say that this counts as a general agreement, which now obligates them. They, of course, have every right to say, we're starting a progressive-only platform and have no conservatives or libertarians or anything else. And they'd always have the right to exclude. My main grief is they say, come on, free speech for everyone, invest all your time, invest all your efforts. And now they enter in the subjectivity and then only apply it to people questioning official stories. You can advocate wars and that kind of mass murder, but if you question, an illness that's been around for like a month and a half, well, then obviously all your channel's gone. So I still believe my original position stands, and either way, we got, no matter who's right about this, we have to go to alternative. Got to be on Library, got to be on Minds, got to be on BitChute, Odyssey, etc.
You've won me over at least on the ones where they just delete things without warning or without going through the process that you agreed to. You agreed to have, okay, you have a chance at a strike and you can appeal the strike. Those kinds of things. Even though those are farces in and of themselves, if they just bypass all that and just take you down, isn't somebody suing them? I thought I saw somebody crowdfunded for a lawsuit that just got funded, and now they're actually suing YouTube. I think they're calling it SueTube. Maybe somebody in the go ahead. I
know that Prager University is sort of getting one together, but they're doing it under the dumbest guise. It's something like, they're too big, as if size determines the amount of rights you have. Ridiculous nonsense. So the people who are in opposition to censorship don't even have a solid foundation for why they oppose it. Libertarians, like everything else, frankly, have a principled approach to this, and that's why we have to get it out there, because there actually is one. It's not just, well, at this point it's too big and now it belongs to the public, or now they have some sort of extra obligation. Ridiculous nonsense. Again, libertarians are the only voice of reason. That's why I think we should embrace the contract principle, apply it to them, explain, again, we're right about this. The only solution, well, there are no solutions, only trade-offs, costs, and benefits, but the solution, as Roderick T. Long likes to say, it's good to educate people. The ultimate check and balance is competition. So you can always say the contract should be better. you can always have better things. You can always have better relations. You have to embrace competition, diversify your portfolio, because if the state starts regulating it, then even the competitors now have a criteria that has to align with the state because they've monopolized the entire platform industry, more or less. So again, everything that all negative things that apply to voluntarily funded competing agencies applies tenfold to a coercively funded monopoly. That's why it's important we recognize we're right again on this, as we were on the financial crisis and the wars and taxation and 765 businesses leaving California this year alone. And we tell people we were right about it, and we have the solution on top of it.
Phobia over in the comments over on Float says, the clause is crystal clear, though, something along the lines of, quote, we reserve the right to terminate or limit your account for any or no reason. So how can you make a contract argument against that?
Just because it's not explicit. That's why I used the example of, I mean, you could look at Jack Dorsey's original tweet about Twitter, how it's about welcoming people, bringing them in, having feisty debates, and engaging in. It's the equivalent of saying, in this fine print on the Apple agreement where you said, I agree, it actually says I get to enslave your children and I own all of your property. That, of course, is not a general something recognized. That's why I use the term meeting of the minds, because it has to be a general understanding. For the same reason you wouldn't be obliged to, well, you owe us your house because it said it at the right in the middle of these Apple terms and agreement sorts of things. That's not the general understanding. Oh, by ordering this food, that means you have to work as a slave for us for 5,000 years. It said it in the fine print. That's just not part of the general understanding that is being promoted. If we base everything off the technicalities and fine prints that exist somewhere in the writing, we're never going to be able to get anything done. All trades would have to have, contracts that are 50,000 pages long to, rectify any possible issue that may arise in the future.
Again, I think what we'll have to have this discussion with Kinsella, because this is interesting, right? I agree that general understanding is definitely a requirement for a contract, but also, I mean, if they go out of their way to put it explicitly in black and white, that's also kind of hard. Like, why did you sign that if it included a clause to enslave your children? You didn't read it? Well, how is that Facebook's fault that you didn't read it?
Because it's unreadable. It's intentionally put there as something that they know everyone won't read. It's the equivalent of the menu that has, we're going to hand us your credit card and we charge it $50 million. I mean, that just has to count, that can't count as something legitimate.
Interesting. Cool. If you're up for it, I will invite you back and we can continue that topic maybe another time with a libertarian contract lawyer. That'll be fun.
He's a patent attorney, but yes, he knows a lot about contract.
Yeah. I've had discussions with him on contract law. He's really astute on it. Does he agree with you? Have you already had this talk with him?
I have no clue. He's been on my show twice, but this hasn't come up.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Market opportunity. All right, so the next thing that you were interested in discussing, and I think it's kind of the hot topic of the day, is voting. And you didn't just tell me that you were interested in talking about voting. You said it in a way that really piqued my curiosity. You said that you wanted to talk about the ignorance of voters and why that matters. So I would love to just sort of hand the floor to you and find out what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there is a lot of research that shows that the voting populace, virtually of like almost every country in the world, with like a small exception in Switzerland, I think, is extraordinarily ignorant about history, economics, civics, philosophy, and everything else that would apply to government or banking. Think of how long it takes you to get, educated about the Federal Reserve or fractional reserve banking or the gold standard or anything else. So this at first might seem weird to a lot of professors who say, but this is your government. You need to get educated and all this other stuff. What ends up happening is people engage in rational ignorance. In other words, they could spend thousands of hours getting educated on certain things, only to find out that most of the things written are written by lying propagandists. And after those thousands and thousands of hours that they're spending over here, that is time they can't spend somewhere else doing things that actually make them happy. After all that time, they get a 1 in 125 million vote between two crooks, most often put up by the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, they understand this, which is the interesting thing, but they don't process it to the point where, they talk about it, because no one in their right mind would say, I'm really informed and not know anything about the justification for the U.S. going into Somalia or anything that's going on with the Central Intelligence Agency in Syria or Libya. Those topics alone take so long. So people are rationally ignorant in the sense of they do not take the amount of time to get informed. And this renders them ignorant, which is perfect for the politician who never has to face a populace that is really questioning of them. And they have a lapdog media that never really nails them down on any serious questions, with the exception of like Ben Swan getting a chance to talk to Barack Obama. Everyone else is just such a softball interview. Even what Trump calls the hardball interview with Leslie Stahl is so pathetic, it's not even funny. So the solution to this, people often say, is, well, we need to invest more government funds into schooling and education, yada, yada, yada. Everything, every shortcoming is a justification for further state violence against peaceful people. Again, they are wrong. What we're able to have ignorance about in the private sector, we're still able to benefit from because of freedom to disassociate and competition that exists in the division of labor. So if I just look around, I'll see tape, a frame, a router, an Ethernet cable, a microphone, and a computer, and a TV, and a mouse, and Jack Daniels. I have no clue about any of those. I'm completely ignorant. Yet, I'm still able to drastically benefit from them because they want my money. I want their product. So ignorance in the marketplace is something that we can benefit from because of the division of labor. Ignorance in the political realm is a shortcoming that allows the state to get away with mass murder on a scale that is never seen. I mean, ask people if they know about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment or Iraqi sanctions in the 90s. They'd never heard of it. That's why they think terrorists just hate us for no reason except we drink Coca-Cola and have Kim Kardashian. It's such ridiculous nonsense. So another thing is they will say that, well, another reason we need government is because, well, people are ignorant and we need the state to, come in, sort of push them along and regulate them. This is completely contrary to what they say every second Tuesday, every other November, where they say, we need people to vote and voting is very important. But when it comes to the marketplace, you can't make your own decisions without the state giving you a license and all this other stuff. So they're essentially saying that people are ignorant except on election day. And on election day, not only do they know what's right for them, they should be able to vote to coercively impose these views on the populace. So the fact that people are so ignorant and getting out of the ignorance is so extremely costly, it's not even funny. That is yet another reason to not recognize the state as a legitimate institution. It's just a utilitarian way that human beings are.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to imagine. I'm just trying to imagine what a fully informed enough voter would look like for me to consensually allow them to have a directive control over my life. And like, even if I go all the way to like, let's say we took the concept that is the hand of the market, right? This is like millions of brains interacting with each other, buying and selling, purchasing, not purchasing, saving, not saving, investing, not investing. We have this thing called the hand of the market. If we could somehow embody that into a voter, not even then, I would argue, would it have enough information to be an informed enough voter for me to hand it control over my life. Like, that is only my job and no one else's. And even though you could even say this hand of the market character knew my internal motivations and my desires and what I value and what I don't value, but it would also be deciding based on everyone else's. And, well, I don't consent to that in my life. And so I can't even steel man what an acceptable voter would be. That's what I was thinking of while you were talking.
And another shortcoming of having a system of voting, by the way, and then this is great. What you can do is, and the alternative to democracy political government democracy is not dictatorship or autarky. It's simply the marketplace. And that's the reason I mentioned earlier. We're ignorant about tons of other stuff in the market that we're easily able to benefit from because of competition, because there's the threat of me finding out if Patrick Smith is simply a fraud. The fact that I could find that out keeps him on his heels, even though he doesn't know it, because I'm, one tweet away, one post away. I could stand out there with a sign. I mean, there was just like one person who flipped out on me when I used to work in customer service. I said, "Thank you, ma'am." And she goes, "You are gendering me." Now, I've had thousands of calls, yet that one sticks out to me, and I'm so scared of getting that again. I just use first names now. So if you can scare someone with just one exposure or getting upset with them at your product or service, they're much more likely to behave in a user-friendly way than they otherwise would be. Again, the market responds to consumer demand way more effectively than any sort of political system ever could. And a problem with democracy and voting is, well, one, politicians, pander to, the totally ignorant masses, because to discuss things on the actual level that matters, you'd start excluding people to the point where you'd have so few people actually listening to your speeches. But also, it really blurs the line between the ruled and the rules, or the rulers and the ruled. This allows for people to say, I get a vote, I essentially am the state, which is incredible. They're not able to determine, you have an obligation to follow these rules that they write. If you try writing rules against them and forcing them on them, you're a terrorist. They write rules against you, you disobey, they cage you, you resist, they shoot you. I mean, you think you are the government, that you are an extension of the thing that rules you. But democracy tells people, so long as they get, a 1 in 125 million vote between two crooks every 4 years, that all of a sudden this, makes it legitimate. Whereas at least when there was a monarchy, you sort of understood that there was I hate the Marxist term class consciousness, but it actually applies. There are two different classes of people with different recognized rights. One has a right to initiate aggression. The other has the obligation to obey. So this is another reason why the legitimacy of democracy, I think, is virtually non-existent, which is the major leg that the state's legitimacy stands on.
One of the only people on Twitch that I enjoy following is Eric July, and he said recently, I'm sure you're on not Twitch, Twitter. You're on Twitter as well, and you recently saw the outrage, I'm sure, about coyotes carrying babies across the border because people were outraged and calling for sort of regulation or control to stop these coyotes in trafficking across the border. And a whole slew of people thought they meant the animal, like a coyote, instead of the nickname for the people that smuggle people across borders. And Eric July pointed out on Twitter, man, he said, these people vote. these people exert control over your life, which I guess is something else important to talk about as we come up on voting season. First question is, do you think voting, and let's narrow it down because I think certainly some votes would be efficacious, but do you think voting in something like a presidential election is efficacious? Do you think it has an effect? That's the first question that I think is important, especially before we can sort of analyze or assign a moral or ethical evaluation to the action. Is it efficacious? And if so, then, what are your thoughts on the morality of voting?
You, one person voting? No. A lot of people voting? Yeah, it frankly does change, assuming, it's not a totally rigged election as it was in, 1948, Lyndon B. Johnson. Everyone who voted for him last minute voted in alphabetical order in the same ink. I mean, just some of the most ridiculous stuff. So, yes, it could have an effect. That's just the reality of it. When people vote in Florida in the year 2000, it did have an effect. So, yeah, certainly it can, but it also has the effect of legitimizing the existence of a state rather than seeing them as a bunch of tyrants who you don't associate with, who you don't let take up any more of your time than they already confiscate. So those are the general effects of voting. It's also somewhat effective when you say the Pledge of Allegiance or say I follow the law, or let's make sure we're in compliance with the state. Those are other things that sort of give the state its halo of legitimacy, which it's undeserving of. Voting is just another method of doing that, or thanking someone for their service if they're a cop or policeman. Is it ethical to vote? You know, when I see someone like Bill de Blasio, who is a literal communist, literally believes in the abolition of private property and says, ideally, all property in New York would be decided by the state. I mean, if someone organizes, if a voluntarist organizes voters to vote him out, I'm not going to really hate on them. I really can't. Or Lindsey Graham pretty much said, you know, we're not against killing all Iranians. If someone in South Carolina said, let's vote against this guy, I wouldn't be totally hating on them. I do not consider it aggression, because I would not be morally justified in threatening someone and then shooting them for engaging in the act of voting, whereas I would rape, murder, kidnapping, theft, enslavement, etc. So it can be effective, but certainly don't let it replace spreading the message of freedom, because if it becomes a primary effort of yours, well, then actually spreading the message and educating the populace and changing the minds of the masses then takes a second or third seat, which I think it should always be first.
So what are your thoughts on the Libertarian Party? Do you have any thoughts, I guess is a better question. Do you care about that whole thing?
Yeah, you know, I certainly wish that we had people in there who were a little more passionate about self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, etc., that they were, you know, a little more, I would like to see a sort of Dave Smith kind of person in there, or a Tom Woods, but at the same time, I don't want to take them away from what they're doing because they're so good at that. I had Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen on my show. I thought they were very pleasant to me. I really appreciated them coming on my show. You know, I'm not exactly Tucker Carlson or anything where they're going to get 1 million views. So I think it's a great vehicle that maybe we could get into and use. I, you know, certainly hear terrible things about, well, yeah, once you get in there, it's run by a bunch of, you know, softies who are so political and so bureaucratic, it does more harm than good. I see that just as I would see, Ron Paul being a part of the Republicans. I mean, sometimes you can just use something to your benefit and capitalize off of it. My heart's not in the Libertarian Party at all. I don't think they stand enough on principle, unapologetically calling the state a group of theft-funded, kidnapping mass murderers, which they are. If I was hearing more of that, then I'd be like, yes, this is the message. The votes, you know, that's all secondary, sometimes a reflection of the ideology. But if we're standing on principle, I think doing it through the mechanism of the party, or even the Republicans, or if we did it on CNN even, I think that's totally justified.
It's a self-defeating group of people, I think. It's a self-defeating goal, I should say. Like, their goal is to be a political party, but that goal is directly contradictory with their own principles, like their own stated principles. They're trying to be a thing that conflicts with their own stated principles, and so they will always fail in achieving that goal. I think they are useful because they grab low-hanging fruit and they provide, a place for people that are still under the delusion of statism to go to when they rightfully get disillusioned from the other parties that have been, destroying everything around us for 200 years. And then they give us people like me low-hanging fruit to then go and introduce to the arguments of, actual liberty and freedom and principle. But by its nature, as that wide end of the funnel, grabbing those disillusioned people from the other parties, it is necessarily going to be full of unprincipled half libertarians that don't really understand or agree with the core values of the label. And that will keep it from being principled, and that will keep it from being different from the other parties enough to get the attention that I think they're trying to get. Anyway, that's my... Unfortunately,
yeah. And that has sadly been the way that they've decided to use it. I don't think I'm thankful for everything. Nick Sarwark really helped me out, but I don't think he took advantage of being the chair, using it to get on any platform or just make his own videos, trying to get them to go viral. Whoever runs the Libertarian Twitter, the LP Twitter account, does not use it to spread the message of self-ownership, non-aggression principle, or anything else. It's, it's always this non-stuff like end the two-party system. Well, what's wrong with two? I sort of like that number two. What's wrong
you just
with
want
that?
it to be three? What's your argument?
Why not 50 million? Are you just saying more equals better? Or, we have to be actively anti-race? I don't even want to get into that. The point is that they never even use the platform for something like that. Or you can just see the difference in the ideology in the Andy Craig, Dave Smith debate, where Andy Craig, you know what? He actually said this. I'm sorry, not in the debate. He said this afterwards. He's like, Dave Smith is all about, talking about the principles, and you know what? That's fine, but doesn't win elections. And I go, an election would be something so far in my rear view that, that'd be nice. Use it just as another platform, as Ron Paul did, as Ron Paul used it to spread the message of freedom. But the idea that elections are even on your mind or winning them, it's about using it as a mechanism to spread the message. In doing so, they so often water down the message, it becomes unnecessary. Or, you get bogged down in these utilitarian technicality ideas of who's, has a better idea with regard to a certain situation that the media is focusing on for clicks. And then that situation's irrelevant in the next 2 or 3 days, and you haven't convinced anyone. So I think I just feel like it has potential, but it certainly hasn't been used. 1970s? And unfortunately, they have not effectively done as good a job as Ron Paul or Ayn Rand or Murray Rothbard or Larkin Rose has.
I read an article by Rothbard on the Disenthrall channel. Viewers can go find that there, called The Case for Radical Idealism, where he talks about how a group like the Libertarian Party should be used. And it's by always advocating for the end goal, never accepting a compromise which walks backwards or works against your goals, but also accepting any compromise that only moves even a little bit towards the goal. And I thought that was a brilliant strategy, and one that I advocated for when I was doing my Not Governor campaign in Texas. And it was my first experience in the Libertarian Party, and I learned a lot, and I'll probably do it again. But again, I'm doing it for the reasons that you talk about. I'm doing it for gaining a platform to talk to people that need to hear about voluntarism and, like you said, self-ownership and the non-aggression principle, and why control and one of the reason why I lose every time I get involved in anything Libertarian Party related is because I don't mince words. I tell people flat out, look, voting is not the way to achieve more freedom. If you vote for me, only do it as an activist to get me behind a larger podium. Voting for me will not win you freedom, and shouldn't even be the way you get freedom. Your individual consent between your own two ears, like the flag, the on-off switch that is your consent to something, should be what determines what is governing you or what is controlling you. And if you withdraw that consent, you don't need a vote to withdraw consent. This is one of the things I said. You don't need to vote to withdraw your consent to be governed. And participating in the Libertarian Party without yelling that point, like you said, it works against yourself because in your action of participating in the party, you're sort of telling everyone around you with your actions that they need to vote to achieve freedom, when that's not how it works. That's not how consent works. That's not how consent to the governed works. And that's not how you get freedom. And so if you're going to play that game for the purposes of getting behind a bigger podium to talk about the principles, you need to almost be extra loud when you're talking about, hey, I'm here standing next to other people that are asking for your votes, but I'm not asking for your votes. I'm wanting you to understand my message that is, if you're trying to vote to be free, stop. That's not how you do it. If you want to get me a bigger podium, okay, vote as an activist. Maybe it's kind of gross, but okay, whatever. But that's not the point. Anyway, that's what I try and do when I do it.
Well, a lot of people in the Libertarian Party sound like they're making arguments to win. Let's just take the presidential election, where it's least likely that they'll win. I think the most likely win they have is Ricky Harrington in Arkansas against Tom Cotton, who refused to debate him on C-SPAN or public broadcasting. So they're making these arguments as in, here's how we can persuade you to let us win, without appreciating the fact that there is roughly zero chance that they can win. It might be Biden, it might be Trump. It is not going to be Joe Jorgensen. So instead of campaigning to get a lot of votes, which you're not going to get, you would want to use this platform as some sort of idea legitimacy campaign. So it's like there might be some fringe idea, but hey, someone's calling for it. Look at how there was a presidential candidate who was calling for a fully voluntary planet based on a constitution of non-aggression. Something like that. They got a lot of advisors. They can come up with something more clever, obviously. But when you use your platform to say things a little different than Biden or Trump, when there's no chance of you winning, the whole purpose is for you to light a fire under the remnant of people who, possibly could be persuaded by the message of freedom. So the fact that it's one thing to be, well, I'm sort of soft because I got in the Trump campaign and now I'm kind of pulling strings. I could imagine you sort of watering the message down then. But when you're watering it down and there's no way that you're going to win, well, what the heck is the point?
Yes. Well said. Well, so what do you think is going, where are we going? Like, I feel like we have the big vote circus happening in November. It's already kind of, the Ferris wheels are already starting to spin. Riots are breaking out at the drop of a hat for any justification, valid or otherwise. I made a prediction a couple years ago when BLM first got started. Police brutality was just sort of getting highlighted in the media. That it's a feedback loop that has no escape clause. And what I mean by that is the police sort of militarize. The police get rougher and tougher and start being more careful and more assertive and more violent, to be frank, in response to being seen as bad guys, in response to being hated. And what that causes is more hate, and it causes more people to see them as bad guys. I mean, which they, of course, generally are almost all the time. But even speaking of like the normie statist mindset, the hate causes more othering, and the two groups just continually see each other as more and more alien, and there's no meeting of the minds possible anymore, only further escalation. The cops, what do you expect the cops to do? Like lay down their arms, take off their body armor, and go try and stop a riot in their day clothes with their fists? No, they're going to escalate. They're going to wear more armor. They're going to buy more tanks, and that's going to justify the actions of a lot of the rioters. And cause more of the rioting and more of the protesting, and I don't see a way out of that cycle. I'm curious if you have any ideas on where it might go. What are your thoughts on the current state and where it might head?
Well, it's certainly difficult to predict the behavior of a wide group of people when they're educated by the state, which is code for under mind control by the media and politicians. So I really have no clue. I mean, I was so wrong about the 2016 election. I mean, making, guesses as to what the future holds, I really got no clue. As far as opportunities for us, if we simply understand our own values, we, again, at the cost of sounding arrogant, kind of have I don't want to say the answer, we certainly have the general understanding approach of how to live in a society in which the problems are simply are just clearly minimalized. So when it comes to police brutality, if you can't opt out of funding an organization, do you think it's going to behave well? Eric Garner's parents have to fund the police force. You think that's okay? I mean, can we come up with some example of when it would be okay? So then they'll engage in what I like to call avoiding the root, which is where you criticize an arbitrary aspect of a situation without getting to the actual problem. So they'll say, oh, you know what? I've noticed that a number of the cops have white skin and a number of the non-cops who get assaulted have black skin. Problems, racism. Well, you could come up with the examples of Tony Timpa getting choked to death by the police, Kelly Thomas getting beat to death by the police, Duncan Lemp getting shot worse than Breonna Taylor because no one was shooting back. The problem is not race. The problem is, one, coercive funding, and two, which complements one, there's a group of people that have extra, that erroneously claim to have extra rights than everyone else. What do you think is going to happen? When I say something, you have to obey. Well, of all what you might call this situation, it certainly is not protecting and serving. I protect and serve you, and I, as the protector and server, get to dictate to you everything that you have to do, and if I'm afraid for my life, I get to shoot you and kill you, and then I get off in court. That is the actual inequality that we're experiencing. It's the one equality that matters, the equality of rights, the recognition that all humans are equal in their, not authority as you're an authority on history or an authority on medicine, but the authority to own yourself and acquire property and engage in any action you think pursues your own happiness, so long as you don't initiate aggression against other people. So in all of these issues, we can again find the libertarian principled approach. So whether it's police brutality, whether it's, people hating on immigrants, blaming immigrants for the problems that politicians cause and everything else. Yeah, it's terrible that they vote. It's also terrible that the American populace votes. The problem is there's public property. There's a state which another group can use against the populace at large. It's not like, we're so terrified of, oh, what are we going to do with Patrick Smith's property? I want to do this and you want to do that. Now we're going to fight forever. It's solved. That conflict is solved by privatization, just as the immigration problem would be solved with total private property over what is now considered public property. So I don't know what the future holds, but I do have a general idea of what people have told me persuades them, and it was simply going over questions like that. The biggest one at the beginning of The Problem of Political Authority by Michael Huemer. A group of 535 people in Washington claim the right to rule 330 million strangers. What justifies that? Planting seeds like that gets people to not on the spot admit, you know what? You're right, I am an anarcho-capitalist. That's never going to happen. What it does, it plants the seed of doubt, and it increases their insecurity with regard to their socialist, fascist, statist position, and certainly makes us look better in the long run.
You think you blew past something in the beginning of there that I want to grab the spotlight and point it back on, because I think this is another powerful teaching tool that you could use in your conversations with people. And it goes to the idea that, stealing money, let's say, from somebody is wrong. And most everyone would agree with that. And most everyone would also agree that then using that stolen money from that person in a way that violated that person's conscience or that violated that person's moral framework is like an extra level of twistedness, an extra sort of level of evil. It's like twisting the knife. Yes, you stole from them, but then you sort of violated their conscience with their own stolen property. And what you said in there had me thinking about, I forgot the name of the guy that you were talking about was incarcerated, but I was thinking about Ross Ulbricht, and I'm thinking about, imagine, his mother is still being taxed, and part of that tax money is literally going to keep her son caged. In any voluntary associative relationship that you'd have with a justice system or sort of a rights enforcement or defense company, if they wronged you, you would never be forced to remain in a relationship where you continued paying them after they harmed you or violated your property or consent. But that is one of another in a very long line of very real tragedies and sort of knife twists that comes out of the involuntary nature of justice and law enforcement that we have now. Not only do they regularly and routinely violate people's rights, but then they make you keep paying for it. Like you will pay for your own children's incarceration. That is another level of fucked.
It is. I mean, And all we really have to do, instead of sort of like throwing the non-aggression principle at someone who would get defensive, just say, I got some problems with the police. I like what sometimes the police do. I mean, they help my grandma. That in a situation, that's a good thing. So all I do, Mr. Statist, is take the police and I hold them to the same standards I'd hold anyone else. The great Professor Jason Brennan just got a book published by Princeton University called When All Else Fails, The Ethics of Resistance to the State. And he makes the excellent case that anytime you have the right to use force against me, it also applies if I get a job. And if I get a job with a group called the President Group. So, yeah, just hold me to the same standards you'd hold Congress or the president or the cops. So when people say, so you want no cops? Well, it's not that I want no cops. I want no double standard. So even though they'll say, well, sometimes there's ambiguity in when someone is engaging in violence. Yeah, these terrible things exist all the time. That in no way justifies coercive funding and one group of people claiming the rights that no other group in that organization has. Oh, but we need a security force. Well, we need food, water, and shelter too, but I don't have the right to steal from you to produce the things that we need. Therefore, if I join a security firm who allegedly provides security, that doesn't give me extra rights that I previously didn't have. So it's just about explaining to these people that what we believe, even though if you look at the big picture, it sounds crazy because we disagree with the average statist on everything. It's like we agree so much, but we just have a different standard applied to this one group, and that's the root of all the issues. So that, of course, would be the same just as if I said, yeah, I apply morality consistently, except to the Koch brothers. Violence doesn't count when they do it, and they have the right to tax you, and they have the right to rule you, and if you don't obey their executive orders, you should be caged and shot if you resist. Well, then obviously there is no principal difference between thinking the church or corporations have the right to rule you versus a state or a government. So simply by taking principles people already believe in, applying them to the state, I think that's our best way to defeat the legitimacy of the state as far as public opinion goes, which is the root of the issue. People believe in something erroneously. We change that idea. The state loses the very power it lives off of.
Okay, I'm going to read a few of the highlighted comments, see if it brings any thoughts to your mind, and also make this the last call for any questions for our guest, Keith. If you have any questions for him, get them in chat now as we go through this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap the show up after that. Lisa says the Libertarians can't even get enough traction to get in the debate, which goes to Keith's point, which is like, why would you slow roll your principles if you're not going to win anyway? You need to be loud and you need to be loud about your differentiators. And that's what I was screaming about 2 years ago in the Libertarian Party of Texas, was like, we don't want to be quiet. We want to be loud because our principles are the only thing that makes us look different from the R's and the D's. And so you don't want to slow roll that.
Excellent point by the commenter. Another example of, when people say, oh, the free market creates monopolies. Democrats and Republicans are the biggest duopoly of all time, and you can't opt out of funding them. Just another blatant idea of, one of the biggest criticisms. Well, the free market leads to monopolies. The state's the number one cause of monopolies, and they are one inherently. So, excellent point by the woman who commented.
Cotblock says they can't even tell the difference between resisting arrest and revoking consent. He said that back when I was talking about withdrawing the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed, I use that phrase often because it invokes all the indoctrination that people learn when they're in, their public schooling about how the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. And when you just say the words, hey, well, you can revoke your consent to the governed, right? And if you can't, then did they ever actually need it or have it or care about it? And what would you think would happen tomorrow? Like if tonight you revoked your consent to be governed by this government, how do you think that would change your life tomorrow? Do you think the government would leave you alone? Do you think that would exempt you from their rule? Like it's fundamental. And Copblock's point is that, they can't tell the difference between revoking your consent to be governed by the system might end up looking a little bit like resisting arrest. I thought that was an astute comment.
Well, the amazing thing is consent of the governed is literally impossible, because even if you pretend there was a time where government said, all right, let's take a vote. Who consents to us? And then everyone consented. So that never happened. Second of all, it cannot logically happen. Government, by definition, has rights the people do not have. If I don't have the right to tax or regulate, how can I vote someone in? Or as the term that Larkin Rose uses, delegate, which is a perfect term. How can I delegate to someone a right that I myself don't have? We get our legitimacy from you, but I never had it. If I don't have the right to go around issuing taxes, how can I give you something I don't have? So on its face, it's consent of the governed is literally impossible.
Agreed. It's a contradiction in terms. You can't consent to be governed, because once you're in a state of being governed, you lose the capacity to consent. It's very simple. I guess the last question that I'll have for you before we wrap up is from Archangel. He's asking for your views on the Shire Society. Now, I only know of this in name. I know very little about it. So if you know what the Shire Society is, do you have any thoughts on it, Keith?
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry. If I could get a quick idea. I mean, Shire Society. I was thinking of Shriners, and I also don't know what that is. So I'm sorry, I got nothing for you.
I think it's a group of people that have signed some kind of voluntarist themed sort of peace agreement amongst themselves. I could be wrong though. I could be way off. But yeah. So sorry, Archangel. We haven't really heard about it, so can't really give you much comment on that. Keith, I've enjoyed our conversation as I always do, and I hope that we can have many more. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about, or? And you're welcome, of course, to end up by, telling us again where we can find your channels and your work.
I think I've said plenty. Thank you so much for having me on. My main message is diversify your intellectual portfolio by getting on Library, getting on Minds. Even if you still use YouTube, because a lot of your, favorite creators are on one feed, just have it as a backup. Take 30 seconds to create the free Odyssey library account. That's probably become my favorite as of now. I still really like BitChute. It's also amazing. You don't realize how censored YouTube is until I found a video on YouTube, Waco Rules of Engagement, and I go, I can't believe this is still up because all the other copies had been taken down. And all of my recommended videos are like Late Night with Seth Meyers and things that I've never watched. They have no relation to Waco at all. But on BitChute, you just get into the rabbit holes of actual truth, not cat videos, James Corden sing-along videos. You get into these rabbit holes of great things you previously, had lost interest in. So, yes, that's my final message. Get on these competing platforms. Keep the message of freedom alive. I'm on minds.com at KeithKnightDontTreadOnAnyone. I'm on Library and BitChute. I also work at the Libertarian Institute with Pete Quinones, the excellent podcaster, foreign policy expert Scott Horton, and the great libertarian Sheldon Richmond. So if you could check out my work there. If you find it of value, please share it. Upload any of my stuff under Kinsella totally convinced me on IP. All of my stuff can be downloaded, re-uploaded under a different name, small clips, rebuttals, anything. I really appreciate that, actually. Pat, thanks so much for having me on.
Sure. Or people, you can just stay on YouTube, and 6 months from now, it will be all pleasant. It'll be cats, and it'll be, stay in your house to keep safe from whatever new thing is happening at the time. And, it'll be life, and you will probably survive, and you won't have to worry about all this stuff. I'm kidding. No, so I
redact my entire statement. We should stay on YouTube. That does sound better. That does sound better.
The last thing I'll say is just something you made me think of. When I first really took a serious look at BitChute, and I started, surfing around on the videos on there, I had the same internal feeling as I had the first time I hopped on Tor and started browsing the dark web and started looking at things like Silk Road and those marketplaces and things like that. I'm like, this is all wrong think. This could never be posted anywhere else. And then the inverse of that happened when I joined a social network like Float, where now when I'm outputting things to people, to my audience, to my friends, I'm free to say what I want to say. And for the first time, not for the first time, but like for the first time in a long time, there's a new responsibility to sort of to have your own self-control over what you say. Because when you're posting on Facebook, you can't say a lot of things, and it's sort of like mommy and daddy are managing what you can and can't say. But once you're free to say whatever you want, like my first instinct was just to post some just offensive ass stuff just to like blow off steam and have a little catharsis because I was finally free. But then I was like, wait a second. Maybe just because I can post this, offensive whatever, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should, it's like I grew up and now I'm in control of my own output to the world. It's a good feeling. Anyway, thanks, Keith. I've enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to many more.
Take care. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Until next time.